Good evening, everybody. Today we're gonna have in our studio as Alex 2 the review by the game marks of the returned Piranha Bytes. Many years have passed since the end of the war against the hybrids and the jacks. The hero of the first episode has retired to live as the kind of hermit. Unfortunately, a new threat looms from the sky and it ends right above his house. Suddenly found out a roof over his head without the equipment accumulated in his previous adventures and haunted by strange creatures, the Sky Hand, who also contained him. Our hero must find a refugee that began his journey through the world of Magalan in search of the allies to find a new treat, in a long race against time and against these creatures that will do everything to make him dead. Is it worth taking in his adventure? Let's find out in our ELEX 2 review. From the beginning, Jax is no longer known character at the end of his first episode. Years of loneliness have weakened him, bringing him back the first level. The difference from the beginning of previous adventure is that how his name is penned, that is many remember him as a hero who saved the world, which is no small thing when he goes around asking for help from practically everyone. Unfortunately, for the rest there is little to do. We have to start from scratch, so you have to accumulate experience these 2 points on various attributes: strength, dexterity, construction, intelligence and acumen, which the affects usable equipment, dialogue and skills. The latter is the case in particular all Piranha Bytes games, can only be learned from the various teachers spread around Magalan, all of which are very expensive. Of course, if it's not possible to acquire all new skills available because you have a limited amount of learning points to invest. In this way, the development of the character becomes a very personal fact and opens up possibility of replaying entire adventures several times, naturally choosing a completely different progression. Another typical trademark of Piranha Bytes is the lack of the real classes. The specialization of decks in effect decides by the attributes and skills developed as well as by the chosen faction. The latter give access to advanced skills and a specific equipment as well as special missions. If you want to, you can decide to remain independent by joining one of the facts absolutely interesting, as well as fascinating the final stages. In all, Magalan is populated by 5 factions who live in close contact with each other, so much they have economic and commercial relations. The Berserkers and the Kaja belongs to Jack's partner with whom he had a son, who are basically fantasy style warrior wizards. The Dawns, Jack's original faction, who have learned to use Alex like no other upgrade to his equipment and unlock the powers of the mind. The Morkans warriors who invoke the help of a brutal god to become stronger in combat, who have live underground. In a maze of tunnels, particularly since the meteor hit Magalan, the outlaws still active despite being overwhelmed by the berserkers live by creating drugs that enchase them in each aspect. Finally, the Celtics, a religious and ultra-technological faction which used to know Jax can only join the Outlaws or Celtics if he has reached level 20, another faction. Consider that each faction make the gameplay slightly different, especially in anticipation of the endings. Be that is made that the main object of the entire adventure is to create a force that will counteract the new alien enemies, bringing it together in outpost led by old acquaintance from the first chapter. If you haven't figured out, ELEX 2 is an open world action RPG, where you have to sweat everything, especially at the beginning. But bluntly, it's classic Piranha Bytes game, with the difficulty curve standing very steep and then getting sweet towards the second half of the game. This has been the case since the time of the Gothic, and those who closely follow the works of the German studio. This type of structuring of the experience is only one of signatures. Simply he loves to make the player sweat for several hours and then give him the satisfaction of being able to retrace his steps by solving everything he had left unresolved and face equally those enemies that previously seemed unbeatable, guaranteeing him more and more freedom of exploration and movement. Some may find beginning a bit too brutal, almost survival, but usually this is the player who loves the Gothic, and Ryzen and the first Alex ask why there is the code the game works step by step that is dominated with experience and acquainted power. They want to savor it slowly, even by crushed it, and then feel the joy of being able to overcome the challenge posed by increasingly difficult clashes and missions that allow you to disconnect and discover more and more secrets of the map that can reserve surprises around every corner. Of course, the sense of disorientating by some it might be understandable, as are the circumstances of certain roughness of the background of the accessory elements, but in general, those who approach ELEX 2 aware of its philosophy would be hard to complain about the progression. After all, the inspiration is one classic role-playing games from which Piranha Bytes never detached completely. So, at the beginning, Jax risk everything and slapped by a little by one. Exploration is slow because you have to pay close attention to where you go, trying not to end up with the arms of some wandering troll, some particularly nervous cyclops, or even just a raptor hunting for food. The game world itself is a large patchwork of biomes, each tied to a specific faction. As always, Piranha Bytes has managed to create a harsh and every varied map built both horizontally and vertically, made up of snow-covered areas, steep mountains, rain-built laboratories, building places on previous rock ridges, impregnable fortress, and so on. Keeping on. So the details of the game is outstanding. ELEX 2 has all. It's about the conclusions. ELEX 2 has all strengths and weaknesses of Piranha Bytes game was well kept in progression of each character, which leaves the player wide freedom for the choice, and with the world built very well. It plays some technical problems and artificial intelligence of the enemies not quite at the top, and a fairly lackluster narrative side. In some respects it's sublime, in others it shows some historical flaws that more than one might not want to overlook. You risk enduring and playing with it for hours and hours, but also hating it for underlying rawness. We like it a lot, we decided to reward it, but everybody decides for himself. Thanks, bye.